Is F1 going to be worth it for Las Vegas? That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. So the race is less than a week away, so in this video you guys are going to have to bear with me because it's not going to be as polished as my ones that I normally do. I actually have some notes with me that I'm going to go over to try to cover as much as I can because there's a lot that has been going on really since the beginning of this year all the way through where we are today with this. So I'm going to cover what I can, the best I can, and there may be some things I miss out, but hey, I'm just going to share what I can to the best of my abilities with you. Now, the whole idea of this F1 going to be worth it for Las Vegas, I'm going to kick this off with something I saw on social media on Twitter from Andrew Neem, and he put this very concisely. It was a really good job the way he did this, and he put out this tweet that said, "Wild to think how many total hours have been lost by Las Vegas commuters due to the F1 construction. What is the metric by which the event will be determined worth it to them? Surely it's dollars generated for the economy, but how many dollars and who sees it?" Those are some great questions to ask because this whole idea of is it going to be worth it for Las Vegas is quite subjective. But he mentions that in there. It's like, okay, for who? Like, who's the money? How many dollars are we talking about? And who's going to see that money? We're going to get into that talking about this. So when it comes to worth it, I asked the question of for what group of people? Okay, I did an interview the other day where I was asked that question. That was my response. What group of people is it going to be worth it for? Casino executives? Yes. Especially if your bonus is tied to revenue numbers. So that's going to be big for the executives. For stockholders, yes, if you own stock in these casinos, it's probably going to be good for you. Casino hosts, yes, because they're going to have big players in town. So, for those groups of people, it's likely to work out well. Now, talk about the issue of tipping. Because so many of the F1 fans are Europeans coming here, and that's not to diss Europeans, okay? Someone mentioned that in another piece of content I put out. It's not to insult anybody else, just recognizing a factual difference in cultures is not by default an insult. So there are cultural differences, and that, is arguably no more noticeable than right here in Las Vegas because the tipping culture is so strong. But if you're, a bar or restaurant worker, there's places that have been adding a 20% surcharge to servers. Or 20% surcharge for the servers. One place told me they were going to do that over a month ago. They just asked me not to share it publicly, but now it's become more known that places are doing it because people have seen it on their bills. But, so for them, food and drink servers, okay, this may work out well in terms of the tips they make. But what about the table dealers at these casinos? What about the housekeepers? People like that, because, if you're a table dealer, and even if you're a high limit, you got a guy betting $2,000 and more a hand at blackjack or at every time he throws the dice playing craps, but never brings the dealer into the game. At the end, doesn't tip the dealer. Whether they just ran out of money for the day, whether they just forget, whether it's they're just irritated with how the game went, they walk out of there, or again just a cultural difference where they just would not think to tip. So and I've worked those jobs too, where it's super busy at work. In hospitality, at the end of the shift, you're like, okay, how do we do in tips? And you find out it's the same as you've always done, or in the bad case, worse than you normally do when you're really busy. That's one way that will definitely hurt employee morale in a company. So, the idea of who's it going to be worth, is it going to be worth it to certain people? You have to segment that down. Because think of like these taxi drivers who are only getting the same flat fee this whole time for trips between the airport and the resort corridor where they get that flat fee. They're going to get a surcharge, right? They have a surcharge for the event, but is that going to make up for 8 months of, the extra time it took them to do, less work, being able to do less work and less rides because of all the congestion that was going on? So, you have to think too of just more than the employees themselves, even here on the Strip, right? About 100,000 or so, plus tens of thousands of more who work around the area, thousands of locals who live around the area, their families, because the time that these employees have lost, with their families over these 8+ months or 8 months or so of all this going on, they can't get that time back. So how do you value that? The people who have a second job, that work here on the Strip, one job full-time, they may have a second job somewhere else part-time, who has taken them so much longer to get in and out of work that, it hurt their hours at their other job. I mean, these are thousands and thousands of people when you really multiply it out to hundreds of thousands of people that you could point to that have been affected by this. The other question is, how are these economic, these impact predictions, right? These estimations, how are they made? Another question, how is the economic impact measured afterwards? How will the public know that these numbers are accurate? I've seen some people say that in some of the content I've put out where they feel like, no matter what happens, that the numbers are going to be publicized that it was $1 billion+ in revenue, but they're not going to believe it. That's an issue too, because so much has happened that, you have so many members of the public here questioning, is this actually going to be worth it for them? Not just a handful of like big companies, right? Big casinos and Liberty Media, but worth it for them, the people on the ground level who've had to take on the brunt of this. And that's the thing that's real crazy about this, is that the biggest companies who need the least financial help, being Liberty Media, who owns F1, and these major casinos, they're the ones who are going to benefit the most from this, right? They're the ones who are going to see the most benefit from this event, because the casinos have already been setting record revenue numbers for this year. So they've already set record revenue numbers this year. Liberty Media is the most valuable sports empire on the planet, valued at almost $21 billion. They're going to be fine no matter what happens. Even if the event's a total flop, they're going to be okay. So, and Liberty Media is getting public money to help with this. So it's the small businesses around the area who've really been hurt. It's the individual employees who don't have the same level of financial resource that these major companies do, who they're the ones getting hurt the most. They're the ones who've been dealing with being most negatively impacted economically for their own personal economic situation. Huge lack of communication and, just a constant hassle for them. The county really should have had police officers out here months ago directing traffic with how it was going. But I even saw one video on social media of a guy who was I think he was driving an SUV, professional driver, who got out of his car at Las Vegas Boulevard in Harmon to direct traffic because it was just such a mess out there. So there's been, screw up after screw up after screw up after screw up in numerous areas along this whole way. And that's why it's getting so much attention. So for the people who are like, well, this is just, from the outside looking in, are like, well, it's just construction going on, or hey, when you have a big event, this is just how it goes. Even by Vegas standards, the amount of construction that's been taking place, the amount of disruption it has caused is unique, to say the least. It's actually pretty incredible. That's why it's getting so much attention. Vegas is no stranger to big events, but a big event that causes this much disruption in this many people's lives for this long a period of a time and has hurt them economically and financially this much, this is rare. And this is not something people are going to want to go through again anytime soon, because the businesses around the area, a lot of them have had to cut employee hours. Some of these restaurants have had to cut employee hours that you've seen maybe in some of these articles. So their tips are down. Cancellations were up at these restaurants in the area. So they don't even have enough, they don't even need as many staff as they did because of so many cancellations. So the business income is down, the employees' income are down. Several of the gas stations in the area nearby have been hit pretty hard. The Arco over on Flamingo and Koval, I saw an article where the assistant manager was saying that they usually pump 5,000 to 6,000 gallons a day, right, that people pump there in gas. And they were having days they were down to 200 gallons. That's it. And for months they've been dealing with this. So, which brings me to the next point here, when people say, oh, well, the business is hurt by the construction, they're gonna make it back. I don't know about that. We're talking 8 months of disruption. People have had months of hours cut for this. Are they going to make that back, in a 3-day event? Is a 3-day event going to be enough to offset 8 months of losses? That's so when people say, oh, they're just going to make it back, I don't know about that. Again, the big casinos, Liberty Media, they're going to be fine in all this. My main concern is more so the smaller businesses and the hundreds of thousands of locals that have been impacted by this. Because last time I checked, the locals are important. This doesn't operate and this doesn't run without hundreds of thousands of people working in it like they do. So, and that seems to be getting glossed over. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. Now, also the CEO of Liberty Media put out a public apology. It was like, it was actually interesting to finally be able to put a face to the brand here, because lots of people are angry at F1 or Liberty Media, but, maybe I just missed it. Maybe I didn't see it, but I didn't see too many public statements or announcements or anything on media or video from the company where you can actually put a face, an actual human face to connect with for everything that's going on here. It was essentially just a brand, is what people were complaining about, the brand of F1 or Liberty Media. So in the apology, he mentioned, $1.7 billion economic impact. That's the highest I've heard. I keep hearing right around 1.3 billion. We'll see how it goes. But, in the apology, it's like, okay, well, what about, giving back the public money for the first responders that they were given for this event? So they already got public money up front. I mean, what about trying to charge the businesses an extra $1,500 per person for the maximum capacity of their venue along the track? I mean, that gets passed on to travelers. So, the public's getting money, or they're getting public money, so the public feels like they're getting squeezed, and the hassle has not been worth it. The businesses, the restaurants and clubs along the strip and in the area of the track, they feel like they're getting squeezed because they have to pass that cost on to the travelers, who now they're gonna have to pay more money. And then for Liberty Media to come back and ask for more public money again for the construction, which, by the way, we're not gonna find out about that for a while. The whole question of whether or not the Clark County Commission is going to approve the $40 million in public funding to go help pay for this construction. And there's a reason for that I'll get to in just a sec. So just the amount of disruption alone from the construction would have had people frustrated, undoubtedly. This amount of construction would have had people frustrated. But the public money part, not once, but twice, and the additional charging to businesses, the fees of businesses, is probably what really pisses off the locals here the most. Because this is not, F1 is not a Vegas sport, right? It's not. This is not like when the Golden Knights began here, right? Or you have the Aces, you have the Raiders who moved here, right? This is not a Vegas team. This is an outside sport from, most Americans are not familiar with, most people in Vegas are not familiar with. So this is not a Vegas team. There's not a real connection to the Vegas area like there is when you have your own team that people locally like to get behind. So the whole feel from F1, based on what they've done, just feels like they're trying to come in here, squeeze as much money as they can from as many areas as they can for this event, and then it's okay, we're gone, see you next year to do it all again. That's a terrible first impression that they have made with what they've been doing so far since they've come into the market here. So the $40 million, about that, we're not going to find that out till after the race. My guess is that the Clark County Commission is going to wait until the revenue numbers come out, because Formula One asked for this back in June. They asked for this back in June. So we're talking, 5+ months now that a decision could have been made. So the county commission is going to wait on that. It's probably going to be several months later. And I think there's really a couple reasons why they're doing that. So one, they're going to wait for the revenue numbers to come out. So say it does hit $1 billion plus in economic impact. Well, then it's easier to come out to the public and say, okay, we hit over $1 billion in economic impact. It's justifiable to give them 40 million of that. And then two, as time goes on, people are going to be less and less upset about F1, right? We'll be into the holidays, Christmas will be coming, New Year's Eve, CES, we'll have NFR during CES, and then Super Bowl is going to be here, right? Other events will be coming along, so F1 will be in the rearview mirror, no pun intended. So, at that time when there's less anger surrounding it, that's when I would expect, if they're going to give them the $40 million, it'll be then. Because right now, there's so much, people are so pissed off about it to begin with that, nobody in public office is going to want to put their name on that right now, because next year is an election year. So we're not going to hear about that for some time. And the revenue for this, we're not going to find out till after the new year anyway, because, the LVCVA's numbers usually get reported a couple months behind whatever month we're in. So this is going to be November, late November. We're not going to hear about this till sometime after the new year, the total amount. So, but even if we do hit $1 billion, locals who've been hurt by this, by all the preparation, they're going to wonder how this helps them. Even if they say, okay, it was $1 billion, $1.3 billion, $1.5 billion, $1 billion, whatever, so many locals will be like, okay, well, what does that do for us? That's what a lot of them are thinking. Even with the apology that came out, and the CEO mentioned the economic impact, people are like, okay, well, where can I get my check, right? How am I going to get, any part of this? Are we going to see any of this, or just going to be, a minority of people? Is that how it's going to go? So I'm going to give some final notes, final thoughts here before I talk about the opportunities for F1 going forward, because this has gone very, very badly. So, but, this is at least a 3-year contract, possibly extended to 10. So F1 will have time. Liberty Media will have time to try to right the wrongs that they have done so far. Now, what will happen? Time will only tell. But one of the things I want to say about this is when Liberty Media came here, they had a clean slate when they decided to come to Vegas. Most people in Vegas and really across the US are not familiar with F1. It was unknown to them. So you had an unknown sport coming into a different market where they're trying to expand, and their actions caused this. Their actions caused this response. That's one thing that some people don't want to seem to recognize. They just want to seem to write off the things that the locals are upset about here as just whining. I've seen that from a fair amount of people online. Hopefully they are the minority. There have been other people though who've seen what's going on. They're like, man, dude, this is crazy. Like, you know, the level of disruption that they're seeing. A lot of people weren't aware of it until I did the video, you know, a week and a half ago. So from cutting down the trees in front of the Bellagio to shutting down the Mirage Volcano to the initial, you know, high price we're seeing for rooms of, you know, that gave the initial impression of like, man, this event is going to be huge. It's going to be incredible, to seeing those room prices fall like they have, and just particularly, you know, the recent onslaught of just the negative impact Liberty Media has had so far. You know, all those things hurt their brand, right? That puts their, I mean, that's, you know, troublesome for their brand and troublesome, you know, that creates trouble for their image, particularly here among the locals in Las Vegas, and that does hurt their brand. So, which goes along with what I'm about to say here, for some of the people who've heard some of these things the locals are saying, and for weeks now or months, you know, they've seen all over social media, the locals being upset, and they say, oh, well, you guys are just, you know, F1 haters. Whatever, clean slate when they came in. So, but I'll have to ask them, well, what other possible reaction would you expect? Giving everything I've just shared, giving everything I've laid out to the best of my ability, like what community would react to this positively? So it's nothing to do with just wanting to be a hater. They didn't even know about this sport or this organization until they got here. They know about them now, and the way they know about them now is not a good way. So no matter what happens in the race, I think a large number of locals, they're still gonna hate F1 because they don't see themselves getting that much benefit from having to deal with all of this. Even if it is smoother in the next years, which I would expect it to be, this first year has gone so poorly that next year, when it comes around, they're not gonna have they're probably not gonna have a good image in their head of F1. When someone mentions F1, they're not gonna be excited about it. Again, a handful will, some of the people who do well during this event, but I think we're gonna see a big part of the local population still not be happy with F1 even after the event is done and if it brings $1 billion+ dollars. Now, some of the opportunities for F1. Okay, delivering massively this year. That's the best thing that they could possibly do, the best way it could go. I know some people have said they don't think that's gonna happen because, you know, the season's essentially wrapped up, right? Already got the winner. Max is his name. So I'm hoping that this does wind up going huge because, you know, like I said, the casinos and Liberty Media, they're gonna be fine. Even if it fails, they're gonna be fine. So even if it just underperforms. But the best chance right now for the most amount of people to benefit from this is for it to go well. That's the ultimate goal, is to get the most amount of people to benefit from having this event here and all the disruption that we've had. So the best chance of that is for it to go well. So we want this to go well because that's the only way to help justify it and have any kind of, you know, positive outlook going forward on the whole thing. The paddock building that they're building, from what I know, is going to be used for other events and other purposes when F1 is not having the race here. What that is, I don't know. So there may be some, you know, it may be resourceful after the race. Another thing that's opportunity for F1 is to help establish Vegas as more of a sports town. This is something more like the LVCVA and the Clark County Commission and other places would like to see, right? Because, you know, we have several sports teams here now, which forever was thought that would never happen in Las Vegas. But now we have several sports teams here, right? F1 is another sport, trying to expand the you know, opportunities to bring more sports fans to the Vegas area and help grow in another market, which also brings me to the point of growing in popularity, particularly with an international audience, so that Vegas could be seen as more of a you know, international destination for places like Dubai and Monaco and things like that. So, you know, if F1's popularity is able to grow stronger here in the US, you know, it's gonna make a heck of a story years from now about how much initial damage they did to their brand and the sport when they first got here to Las Vegas. So, you know, they have opportunity in front of them, but it's just been really catastrophic this first year. Now, you know, years down the road, will it pay off? Right, that's another thing, is economic impact. How do you measure long or short term, medium term, long term, and then all the different levels that I talked about for small businesses, huge corporations, you know, all these individual employees. Like, there's so much that factors into it. It really is subjective, but time will ultimately tell. And Liberty Media right now, they have a lot of work ahead of them if they want people in Las Vegas to not get angry when they hear F1 mentioned. What will transpire going forward, I don't know, but, you know, that's where the focus is right now. It's been a bad intro to the marketplace, But going forward, we'll see how opportunities arise and what happens from there. So thanks for watching, guys.